The Gospel is John 18.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he is claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is the king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So, I want to talk today about Passover and about why Passover is such a big deal when it comes to the crucifixion of Jesus. Why in the world do they keep telling us over and over and over again that this was the Passover, this was the preparation for the Passover? So I'm going to tell you the story first of the Passover. We're going to start with Jacob and Rachel. Jacob and Rachel had a whole bunch of sons, a whole bunch of them, even a dozen. And one of them, Jacob's favorite, was Joseph. Have you ever heard of Joseph in the coat of many colors? Yes, that's the Joseph. He was Jacob's favorite. Well, all the other brothers didn't like this very much, as you may imagine. And so one day they were out in the field doing their shepherd stuff, and they decided to grab Joseph and tie him up and throw him in a well, and then take his beautiful coat back and show his dad that he had been killed by a wild animal. Well, they did this. They threw him in the well, and in the meantime, this whole group of slave traders came through, and they thought, well, let's make some money off of this. So they sold Joseph into slavery. And they take Joseph into Egypt. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details of what Joseph goes through. It's a really great story, but I'm not going to do that today. But suffice it to say that eventually Joseph becomes the Pharaoh's right-hand man. It's a true Cinderella story, right? He becomes the Pharaoh's right-hand man. And when famine had come to the nation, Joseph had stocked up a whole bunch of food so that people could come and get food from Egypt. Well, his brothers had to come get food. So they came, and they knelt down before Joseph, and after a series of little jokes, Joseph reveals himself to them. And there's a forgiveness, and Joseph says, bring the family. Come live in Egypt with me. And they did. They all moved to Egypt. So this is how the Israelites got to Egypt. And as they lived there, they grew, they multiplied, they procreated, and there was a whole bunch of them. So, I don't know, maybe a generation or two down the line, Joseph, of course, is gone by this time. The Pharaoh says, there's so many of the Jews, or the Israelites, if they decided to, they could take over this country. We have to do something to stop them before they think about doing this. So they put the Israelites in slavery. And they forced them to work hard labor. Well, this went for about 430 years. And then Moses comes along. Remember Moses? He was put in a little basket out in the water so that his mother didn't have to kill him because they were killing all the Israelite boys. And the Pharaoh's daughter finds him and raises him up. Well, he eventually goes out and becomes a shepherd as well. He finds his roots and he goes and becomes a shepherd. And while he's out there, he's walking around in this bush. This burning bush catches his eye. And he stops and he looks at it and he listens. And God calls him to go save the Israelites. And of course he says, not me. I can't do that. I can't talk that well. I stutter. So God gives in and gives him his brother Aaron to go with him. So the two of them go into Egypt to save the Israelites. Now there's several plagues. Did you all remember learning about the plagues? The grasshoppers and the frogs and the boils and oh my goodness, all that stuff. The final plague was that the firstborn son of each family would be killed, would die. But God didn't want to do that to the Israelites. So he told them to kill a lamb, to roast and eat that night, and to take the blood of the lamb and put it over their door and down the sides. And that way death would pass over them when it saw the blood on the doorpost. It would be a testimony of their belief, of their faith, of their trust in God. And so that's what they did. They killed the lamb, and they painted the blood around their door. Do you see where this comes with Jesus? Why is he the Passover lamb? It's his blood that keeps death, the death of sin, away from us. It's when we it's when we declare his blood. It's when we declare his name. It's when we paint it on our lives that we declare our faith in God, our trust in God's promises. Jesus is the Passover lamb. He sees to it that it's not just Israelites, but he's called the Gentiles. He sees to it that death will pass over us, that sin will be wiped away. Now, of course, this is not physical death. We know that. We know that we still face that here and now. But death doesn't win anymore. Now there is life after death. Now there is hope for more. And that's why Jesus is compared to the Passover lamb. And it was right during this time, God told the Israelites to celebrate this every year. So it was right during this time. It's a big celebration, as you can imagine. And it's right during this time when everybody's coming to Jerusalem. And everybody's celebrating the Passover lamb. Some of you may have seen the video that I did one Good Friday about Watch the Lamb. I can't think of the singer's name now. He talks about the family going in with the lamb to sacrifice at the temple. And he tells the kids to watch the lamb. And as he goes in, he notices this mob going on and this craziness going on in the streets. So he stops to watch, and he sees Jesus coming down with the cross. Well, somewhere in this mess and this crowd, he gets separated from the kids. And he follows Jesus out, and he sees him hung on the cross. He sees him crucified. And the kids come up eventually and find Dad. And they put their hands in his, and they say, Dad, I don't understand what's going on here today, but please don't be mad. The lamb ran away. And Jesus turns him around, and the Father turns him around and looks at the cross and says, children, watch the lamb. He is your lamb. He has died so that his blood could save you and give you new life, new hope. It's your choice. Do you know that you could choose not to put the blood on the doorposts? There were some who didn't believe. And they lost death. They lost their firstborn son. Death came to their family. It's your choice. The blood's been shed. What will you do with it? Let's just take a moment with the Holy Spirit.